2,000 years. And I'm the first Catholic that I can find in 1,000 years in my family. Almost all Unitarians and other kinds of Protestants. So I came from a family that was fairly rich, well off. My father was a consultant and a high-ranking Army officer, and my mother was a ballerina. And all the time I grew up, I had no relationship with God. Whenever I hear Father Bouquet talk about his big family and how he lives next to a church, I'm always so jealous because I wish I could have grown up in a family like that. So I had all of the anti-life attitudes. I thought there were too many people in the world already in the 1970s. I believed in environmentalism. You know, we should let the gays do whatever they want to and all of this. So I had no idea about any of the topics that I talk about today. So I was a rich kid and I associated with rich kids. And one day I met a beautiful poor girl from a large family of 10 children. And something was different about her. When I went to her house to meet all of her family, you know, just as a social event, they all seemed to be very happy. They had one very old car. Their house was not too good, you know, it was kind of falling apart, and they wore old clothing, but they were happy. And I realized, what do they have that I don't have? And as I wandered around the house, I saw crucifixes everywhere. And this is my introduction to a life trying to please God. And so as we grew closer, my wife Kathy and I began to discuss various things. You know, what if we get married? How many children do you want to have? And I said, well, I think because of the environment and the population, we should only have 1 or 2 children. And my wife said, well, I think I'd like to have 3 and 4. So we compromised and had 7. And all of these children are very, very successful. They're very, very faithful to the church, except for one, and I have confidence that he will come back. So it's a beautiful story. And on my side of the family, not too many people thought that this was going to work out very well. Because on my side of the family, there's a lot of divorce and a lot of separations and things like this. But Kathy and I just celebrated our 50th wedding anniversary. And so I think we've done very well for ourselves. We're both full-time pro-lifers. My wife is the executive director of the Front Royal Pregnancy Center, which helps women in Front Royal, our hometown, where Father and I come from. And she's been doing this work along with me in pro-life since about 1984. So we've had a lot of experience, a lot of wonderful things have happened. And the best things are the jobs we do and the children we have. We now have 14 grandchildren, and I'm sure we're going to have many more on the way. So that's a little bit about my family. A little bit about Human Life International also. We were founded in 1972 by Father Paul Marx, OSB, Benedictine monk. And he's been called the Apostle of Life by Pope St. John Paul II when he met him back in the late 1970s. Father Marx was born in 1920 and he died in 2010 after leaving behind a great legacy. He came from a family of 17 children, and he said that he was very much influenced when his mother had a miscarriage with the 16th child and was weeping over this little baby. After all of these children, she was crying over this little baby, and that started him on the road to being a great priest and a full-time pro-lifer. We're located in a little town called Front Royal, Virginia, about 120 kilometers west of Washington, D.C. So we're kind of rural, out in the country. It's not a very big city, but it's very Catholic. We have a great Catholic church. We have a great Catholic college here, Christendom College, which is one of the most conservative and the best Catholic colleges rated in the entire country. Our chapel is in the middle of a 6,000 square meter HLI headquarters, and the Holy Mass is the center of the day. So whenever a priest is there, whenever Father's home, or we have another priest there, we always have the holy sacrifice of the Mass, which sustains us in all the troubles we sometimes have. We've always been led by priests from the very start since 1972. Currently, Father Bouquet is our president. Father Francesco Giordano is head of our HLI Rome office, and Father Juan Carlos Chavez of Vida Humana Internacional, our largest branch in Latin America. Now, Father Marx was the Johnny Appleseed of the international pro-life movement. Johnny Appleseed was a legendary figure in American history, and what he did was he planted apple trees all over the Midwest. And the legend has it that for 30 years, he'd be sustained by the people, and he would go out and plant apple trees everywhere. And what Father Marx did was, instead of planting trees, he planted organizations for life. He visited 91 countries, and in many of them, he organized them by giving them money, giving them instructions, and then telling them to get started. So this is why today, Human Life International has more branches than any other pro-life organization in the world. And many of them are still operating very well. We're in 101 countries right now. 101 countries we've visited all around the world. Now, we are faithful to all aspects of church teaching. If you'd like to know what HLI's teaching or position is on anything, just pull out the Catechism of the Catholic Church. We follow church teachings right down the middle of the road, just as they're supposed to be taught. So we're not left-wing, we're not right-wing, we do not get involved in politics. If somebody asks us a question, we tell them exactly what the church teaches. There is no other significant pro-life presence in Asia, Africa, Latin America, and the Caribbean. So in the Northern Hemisphere, we raise the money. In the Southern Hemisphere, we spend it. So almost universally, in the southern part of the globe, HLI is the only pro-life organization that there is. Every year, our missionaries travel about 500,000 miles, or about 800,000 kilometers, and we've been doing this for about half a century. A total of 40 million kilometers of travel to 167 different countries. That's the same distance going to the moon and back 40 times. So we go all over the place. So we raise money in the Northern Hemisphere and spend it in the South. And our operating principle is quite simple. It's 100 times easier to stop an evil from coming in than it is to let it come in and take root and then try to get rid of it. So we're trying to arm the countries of Latin America, the pro-life countries of Asia and Oceania, and especially Africa. We're trying to warn these countries that when these evils come in, they will destroy your country. They will destroy the morality. They will destroy the happiness of the people. They'll destroy the family. And the priests and bishops' jobs will be much, much harder as a result. Our overall strategy is IOTEM, which is we identify promising pro-life leaders and supporting resources. So we look at the situation, is somebody here a good leader? Are there enough resources where we could start a pro-life group? Then we organize the people and the resources so that they are working together. Because individual pro-lifers can never be as strong as all pro-lifers working together. Then we train these new pro-life groups to do the mission, keeping in mind what the environment is and what country they're in. Then we equip them with the best tactics and information and publications in the world based upon HLI's experience. And we are going to equip you with what you need today. And then finally, the M in IOTEM is we mentor these organizations, which means we follow them up, we see how they're doing, we support them until they're completely independent. Now, what issues do we deal with? Often I get a lot of questions from people all over the country in the United States about all different kinds of topics. So we have to narrow our focus because we're not an enormous organization. And what we have for core issues are abortion, which includes the abortion pills and abortifacients, like the birth control pill and IUD, contraception primarily, the condom, marriage, euthanasia, and assisted reproductive technologies, like in vitro fertilization. So those are the core topics. But we do have the capability to answer questions about other types of issues which are connected or tangential. They're not the core issues. These include homosexuality and transgenderism, transhumanism, population control, sex education, feminism, global warming, dissent, capital punishment, cloning, and ethics. So there's this vast universe of all of these topics regarding bioethics. And so we have to concentrate on the core issues, which are the most important ones that are facing every country every day. So our general mission is to create effective opposition to the culture of death all around the world. There are very, very few of us. They have many more people than we do. They can spend $1,000 for every dollar that we have. What they don't have is the grace of God above. And so we are making progress all around the world. We win in some places, we lose in some places, but the word is getting out. And people sometimes speak of a post-Christian age. I don't like that term. It's post-Christian. I prefer to think about a pre-Christian age, because if we do our job in the life issues, we will go a long way towards reestablishing Christianity as the only source and the only way to God. And this is what we truly believe. So some of our accomplishments since 1972, no one has done more than HLI to advance the cause of life all around the world. In the mid-1980s, a medical doctor named Dr. Rene Bulacer from Cebu in the middle part of the Philippines started speaking against condoms, and he convinced the government of the Philippines to keep condoms out of the country. This did not last forever, but very fewer Filipinos died than those who died in Thailand, which pushed a 100% condom use program. We estimate that Dr. Bulacer rescued at least 125,000 Filipinos from AIDS. In our crisis pregnancy centers in Mexico and Austria, has saved over 110,000 babies. We have stopped or delayed the legalization of abortion in at least a dozen different nations. We exposed the Chinese forced abortion program. When Steve Mosier of Population Research Institute was part of HLI a long time ago, he is the one who exposed what the Chinese were doing. In the last 5 years, we have trained and equipped about 10,000 seminarians, priests, and pro-life leaders all over the world. That's an average of about 2,000 every single year, which is very important because every leader, every seminarian, every priest will affect thousands of people in their lives. And so if we can equip them on the pro-life issues, they'll be much more effective in preaching about them. We've also exposed national security study memorandum to all over the world. This is the 1984 population control blueprint for the United States that was written up by Henry Kissinger under President Richard Nixon. And it shows how to exploit these countries, especially in Africa and Latin America, to exploit their natural resources by keeping the population down. And I'll talk about this a bit tomorrow. The United States natural resources by keeping the population down. And I'll talk about this a bit tomorrow. The United States, Canada, England, the rest of Europe, South Korea, South Africa, Australia, New Zealand, they don't really care about the people of this country or the people of Africa. If you'll notice, they're pushing transgenderism, LGBT, divorce, population, birth control, population control, all of this. What do they all have in common? If you look at all of them, the one thing they have in common is that they all reduce the population. They don't really care about the rights of LGBT people. All they care about is that these people have less children. And the purpose is, let's say if Tanzania has less and less people, there will be less and less people to use the natural resources. And it's easier for the United States and the other so-called developed countries to steal the natural resources, especially through corrupt politicians. So one of the many specific areas we concentrate on is the ineffectiveness of condoms in preventing pregnancy and HIV/AIDS. This is something that you're going to encounter a lot. Father Opio of Uganda has encountered this tremendously. In 1970, who introduced the CBC program, which saved many thousands of Ugandans from HIV/AIDS. And why is this? The more condoms are used in African countries, the higher the HIV rate was. Because condoms break and tear and slip off a lot of the time, about 60% of the time. You'll never see this on any billboards. They all say, protect yourself 100% from HIV/AIDS and pregnancy. This is not true. They will lie to you. And Population Services International, the Father mentioned before, is the #1 pusher of condoms in the world today. So I'm going to talk about a thumb drive here upon which there's a short book, 80 pages on the case against condoms, the scientific and theological case against condoms. Opposition research, you really need to know who the enemy is, or you're not going to know where the next initiative is going to come from. They will defeat you. No movement can be effective. You can't even survive if you do not know who the enemy is. And I'll talk about opposition research in a few minutes. There are about 1,000 social issues, primarily population control, transgenderism, women's rights through abortion, LGBTQ, and all the rest of it. There are 3,000 others that spend a part of their income towards also these causes. So a huge amount of money goes into Africa to push population control. I've done the calculations myself. Since 1991, $235 billion US dollars have been spent on population control in Africa. If they really cared for Africans, why do 300 million Africans still not have clean drinking water? All that money could have provided that clean drinking water and could have increased the lifespan of the average African by 15 to 20 years. But instead of spending money on wells and filters, they're spending it on trying to keep the population down. So the second part, the third part here, I'd like to talk to you a little bit about the main resource we use to distribute to people. And it's a small thumb drive. There are about 80 of them in this little bottle here. 220 of them can fit in the small bottle. Now, if you have a computer, I have to say what Father said before, turn off your television and turn off your computer. Well, unfortunately, I have to say turn your computer back on, because have I got something good for you? It's this size. You can see this little black square. You can carry it around in your pocket. And what makes it so unusual is that for about 40 years now, I've been collecting all you need to be an informed pro-lifer. And all of this is arranged so you can find it quickly. So there are more than 20,000 documents on this little tiny thumb drive. They're equivalent to 12 full DVDs. That's a lot of information. That's about 4 million pages or 8,000 books on this little tiny DVD. If you printed out all of these books and made a stack out of them, they'd be 200 meters high. That's how much information is on this tiny little DVD. So I'll tell you a little bit about what's on it. You can, of course, copy it if you like and pass it on to your friends and your organization, and start taking a look at it here. There's an index of 2,500 topics. And I don't care what topic you look up having to do with life issues, there's going to be information on this little thing for you. So the first thing you do when you get it, and all of you will get it if you speak English, it won't do you much good if you don't speak really good English, and we're working on that, converting parts of it into other languages. But the first thing you do is you go to the comprehensive index and look up whatever topic you want, or just read through parts of the index, and you'll see the detail that's there. Everything you need to know almost anything about the pro-life issue. So to begin with, let's take a look at what I just mentioned, the anti-life organizations. There are many of them out there. And on this little thumb drive are many dossiers on the primary organizations, which I'm adding all the time. Pro-abortion groups, population control groups, gay rights, transgender, environmental and animal rights groups. Not all of the environmental and animal rights groups are bad. We're talking about the ones who hold the earth as a higher value than the dignity of human beings, or animals equal to men and women and children. These are the kind who push population control. We have feminist groups. They're not all bad. These radical feminist groups, the one we're talking about, are the ones pushing abortion and population control. Then there are groups that are trying to undercut the Catholic Church. We call them dissenting groups. And this is very important because there are only two things that can stop the culture of death in the world today: the Holy Catholic Church and the family. And so why are they attacking these two so strongly? Because they want complete domination. They want complete control. In one sense, it's all about money. But the real root of the problem is a need for control. Control of everything in the United States, from the words you speak to the number of children you can have, whether or not you can have an air conditioner, what kind of car you can drive, even in some cities, what size of cup you're allowed to have. You can't have a cup more than 200 milliliters. Otherwise, that's bad. They want to control everything. But the very root of all of this is turning away from God and not recognizing the great dignity of the human being who's created in the image and likeness of God. That's where all of this springs from. And so much of the writing on this thumb drive will help to make that clear. So some of the groups that operate in Tanzania are International Planned Parenthood Federation, Marie Stopes International, Population Reference Bureau, Center for Reproductive Rights, United Nations Population Fund, the Population Council, the Gates Foundation, IPASS, and PATH, our Program for Appropriate Technology in Health. There are many others, and all of them have dossiers on this little thumb drive. So if you see Marie Stopes International on a t-shirt, or you see a group like IPAS or PATH or PSI or PRB, many of them don't give you their titles, they just give the initials. They say, what on earth is that? I'm going to go look it up. And so go to the index and look up Population Reference Bureau. Are this a bad group or is it not? And it will tell you all about them. Some of the information, what nations do they work in, what are their activities, their publications, their quotes, their incomes, and their annual reports, which tend to tell you everything they're doing that they're proud of. Also on this little thumb drive There are more than 500 books by the anti-life people, primarily organizing manuals. So if you find a bad group is going against you or criticizing you, you can look at their manuals and find out what their procedures are. And if you learn them well enough, you'll learn how to stop them before they even get started. And there are some books on there like the environmentalist book entitled How to Kill People to Save the Animals. And they're serious about this. This is how we know which are the bad environmental groups. They're willing to kill people to save birds. Or how to sink ships. They're you don't, oh, okay, I have to remember to speak slowly and to put my lips close to this microphone here. I always forget. Thanks, Father. There are many other things like how to intimidate people, how to assault people and get away with it, how to destroy property and get away with it. The people we're up against have absolutely no limits. They are amoral. Their motto is by any means necessary. As far as church documents are concerned, this little thumb drive will be a treasure trove for seminarians and instructors. All of the encyclicals of the Catholic Church since 1754. There are 303 encyclicals, all of them in their full form. All the 16 Vatican II documents. Another 230 documents by bishops' conferences on the life issues. Also the Catholic encyclicals, all of them in their full form. All the 16 Vatican II documents. Another 11,627 articles on any aspect of the Catholic Church, down to the tiniest detail. Then there's the Summa Theologica, the complete works of the early church fathers. 30 volumes of the complete works of the early church fathers. So it's an actual intellectual feast for anybody who's interested in the incredibly rich history and theology of the Catholic Church. On the side of science, there are a lot of scientific articles and resources on this little thumb drive. As Pope St. John Paul II said, in Fides et Ratio, faith and reason are like the two wings upon which the human soul comes to know God. And one of the great things that I've always liked about the Catholic Church, one of the first things that brought me into the Catholic Church 50 years ago, was the fact that everything the Church teaches, especially on sexual morality, is always supported by science. The opposition has nothing but emotion. We have both faith and science on our side. So anything that you want to know about Catholic sexual morality can be supported by science. And one of the most outstanding examples of this are the abortifacient methods of birth control. We're talking about the IUDs, the abortion pill, the birth control pill, the patches, the inserts, the injectables and all of these. There are 1,800 different types of these abortifacients, and all of the patient information pamphlets are on this little thumb drive. Now, interestingly, these are all produced by the manufacturers themselves. So if somebody denies, let's say that the Aspen birth control pill causes abortions, you can just pull up the patient information pamphlet by the manufacturer and say, look right here in paragraph 3A. It talks about how it prevents implantation. Or if somebody wants to know about the 55 to 67 different side effects, you can go to the patient information pamphlet, paragraph 6, and it lists all of them right there. Coronary thrombosis, stroke, everything down to growing hair all over your body, and a loss of a sex drive. All of it there by the manufacturer, so it's not pro-life propaganda. This is from the Upjohn pharmaceutical corporations and all the other big pharma corporations themselves. So science always backs up what the Catholic Church teaches. In the United States, a third trimester abortionist by the name of Warren Hearn has estimated more than 30,000 women have been killed by the birth control pill in the last 40 years. And so these are statistics and facts you can show to young ladies who are considering the possibility of using this kind of abortifacients. We also have several beautiful movies on fetal development, all of them medically accurate. One is Baby Steps, another one is Baby Julia. We have Hard Truth, which is a very difficult one to watch. It talks about abortions. And also Bernard Nathanson's famous Silent Scream, which is 30 plus years old, but still very, very informative. We have also the pseudoscience of eugenics, where it all started. Now, all of this nonsense of population control, the homosexuality, the birth control, transgenderism, all of it began in the pseudoscience of eugenics back in the 1920s. And their motto is self-development of the human race, self-propelled evolution. So they're saying that we should be able to evolve ourselves forcibly into the future. And this includes even things like transhumanism. So to begin you off here, we have about 240 eugenics books for those of you who are interested in this kind of thing. And all of it talks about what eventually turned into the Nazi selection programs. They didn't start by killing priests or Jews. They killed over 18,000 handicapped and people who were also mentally handicapped at first. Now, what happened in the United States was this was a hotbed of eugenics. And we had many eugenic sterilization laws in the United States beginning in the 19-teens, like 1912, 1913, 1914. By the time 1930 came around and Hitler had his terrible dreams in mind, the Nazis were watching the United States and watched their sterilization programs. And they launched those same sterilization programs in Germany in the years 1935 to 1937. And it talks about on this little thumb drive how the Nazis got their ideas from the United States. Well, now eugenics no longer exists under that name. Now it's called social biology. And we see it writ large in all of these efforts to hold down the population of Africa. Now, one man who was the most pivotal in all of this was a man named Lothrop Stoddard, who wrote a book called The Rising Tide of Color Against White World Supremacy in 1922, a little more than a century ago. He was a Harvard professor. And this entire book, which is on this thumb drive, you can read it if you like, talks about how the black race is going to overwhelm the white race if we don't try to hold their population down now. Remember, this is more than a century ago. He wrote a follow-up book called The Menace of the Man, and he talks about how the white races of North America and Europe have to hold down the colored races, he called them, of Latin America, of Africa, and of Asia. And so very interesting history here. And if you look at the fact that Lothrop Stoddard served on the board of directors of Margaret Sanger's American Birth Control League, was her #1 advisor, the American Birth Control League soon turned into Planned all over the world. International Planned Parenthood was founded on a very profoundly racist principle that the colored races have to give way to the white supremacy. And today we see this worry increasing more and more and more. If the current demographic effect continues, in 600 years there'll be 2 white people left in the world. And they're all going to be in some zoo in Africa. And all the little children will say, "Mommy and Daddy, why do these people look so strange? They're all pale." And Mommy and Daddy will say, "Well, they used to be a great race, but they were selfish. They stopped having children." And so what we have is that the much feared demographic cross talked about by Lothrop Stoddard more than a century ago, where Africa has a population going up and we have Europe with a population going down. He feared that there would one day be more Africans than Europeans. Well, that day happened in 1997. For the first time, Africa had a bigger population than Europe. Still, Africa has an average population or an average family size of about 4 children. The average European just over 1. So the trend is accelerating. The white race is dying out. But who cares? If we're too selfish to have children, we deserve to die out. The point here is that we have to preserve the human race dignity, not the human race color. So that's what we talk about. That all of us, regardless of what our skin color is made in the image and likeness of God spiritually. And so we watch these interesting trends in demographics, all of which are described on this little thumb drive. So eugenics is the fundamental principle of everything that's going on in the world today. We also talk a lot about National Security Study Memorandum 200, or the Kissinger Report of 1974, which names 13 countries, most of them in Africa, which have to be targeted for population control efforts. And it shows the measures which are going to be used to hold down the population of Africans. And this is a very persuasive thing to show to parliamentarians and other leaders, to show that this is not just a conspiracy theory. It was actually written out by Henry Kissinger, and it's going into effect all around the world today. There are many other very unusual types of resources on this thumb drive. Who here is familiar with Donald Duck, the cartoon character? Who's heard of Donald Duck? Well, he was a very famous cartoon character by Walt Disney. And there's a movie on this thumb drive that has him promoting population control in India. Population control in India. Imagine a cartoon duck promoting population control in India. Then we have Alfred Kinsey, who along with Mary Steichen Calderon, MD, organized and initiated the sex education program in the United States. We have both of Kinsey's books here, the male report and the female report. And finally, one of the more interesting books by the Centers for Disease Control, How to Prepare for a Zombie Epidemic. So if anybody here is afraid of zombies, we have the best epidemiologists in the world and the best scientists in the world at the Centers for Disease Control in Atlanta, Georgia. They'll tell you how to prepare for zombies. This is what we get under Biden. Now, one of the cores of this little thumb drive is a series of 267 articles on any topic in pro-life you'd like to know. So it asks a question, and in 3 pages, it answers it for you. So some examples are, my homosexual friend told me that he was born this way. Why is that not important? And the answer is quite simple. We're all born with weaknesses. This little article tells you how to address this kind of topic. We're all born with weaknesses, and we are here to overcome our sins through God's grace and for His greater glory. So if a person is born gay or thinks they were born that way, it's irrelevant. It doesn't matter. It's a bad thing for you, and it's a bad thing for society. I can't tell my wife at 50 years, Kathy, well, I was born a drunk, I was born an alcoholic, even though both my parents were alcoholics. And so I come home every Saturday night drunk out of my mind. Come home every Saturday night drunk out of my mind and just, make a mess. And just, make a mess in our house. Maybe I was born an alcoholic, I don't know. But it doesn't mean just because I was born that way means I can act it out. What are the side effects of a certain form of birth control? You can find it in the patient information pamphlets on this little thumb drive. Why are virgin teenagers happier than the ones who are engaging in sexual activity? There's a list of 14 things that these young people don't have to worry about. We find it to be especially effective in Africa because being a teenager is terribly difficult. You have to answer questions like, do I want to be married to this certain person or not? What is my vocation going to be? How am I going to go out for sports? What do I want to do with my life? When you're not having sexual relations, we list all the things that you don't have to worry about. And it takes a great load off your mind. You don't have to worry about your reputation. You don't have to worry about getting a sexually transmitted infection. You don't have to worry about how are you going to hide your contraceptives or the side effects. And if they fail, as they often do, where am I going to get an abortion? All of these things. Most of all, you don't have to worry about the fate of your eternal soul due to sexual immorality. So we tell these young people this long list of things you don't have to worry about. Keep your life simple and be chaste. How many years of life are lost because of homosexuality? An active homosexual person used to lose 25 to 30 years off their life. These years, because of all these medications, it's about 10 to 15 years. So if you enter this homosexual lifestyle as a person in your 20s or 30s, you're going to lose 10 to 15 years from your life. And the years of life you do have are not going to be healthy. You're going to have all kinds of sexually transmitted infections, and the side effects of the powerful drugs you have to take are very, very profound. Which assisted reproductive technologies are licit? Go by the 5 criteria given in Donum Vitae. There's an article that lists those 5 criteria and links to Donum Vitae on the thumb drive. How many billions of dollars have been spent on population control in each country? In Tanzania, it's been $6 billion. In Africa, nearly 230 billion. All around the world, over 300 billion. All of it has been completely wasted. All it's done is made large poor families into small poor families. It's done no good at all. What is transhumanism? How do people work? These population control organizations work by sneaking manual vacuum aspirator machines into the country. What are their sneaky ways of bringing illegal abortion into a country? What is contraceptive corn? What does Monsanto have to do with it? Very, very interesting concept about 30 years ago, where they were trying to make a kind of maize or corn that would sterilize the person eating it. This is a kind of tactic so they have no problem using. And how did the Nazi program begin in the United States? And perhaps the most important thing on this entire thumb drive is a 720-page book of jokes. So if you're ever feeling a little bit sad, there are 720 pages of all kinds of jokes that you could read, and all of them are clean jokes, except maybe one called, "Thank God It's Not Friday." I wouldn't use that one in a homily, but all the rest of them are just fine. Okay, that's that, the little thumb drive. A very important thing that's on the thumb drive is a pro-life missionary training program. This is a complete 40-hour program that you can do in groups or by yourself to prepare yourself to be a good pro-lifer, a good, effective pro-lifer. And it will teach you everything you need to know. So Pope St. John Paul II told our founder, Father Paul Marks, OSB, in 1979, that you're doing the most important work on earth. Pro-life work saves not only families and lives, it saves souls. So it certainly is the most pro-life, the most important work on earth. So an average medical doctor will study maybe 12,000 hours before they're permitted to practice. An attorney, about 4,000 hours, a soldier, 1,200 hours, and somebody who cuts hair, about 800 hours. So is rescuing babies and families and souls more important than cutting hair? I think it would be. And so if 800 hours could be spent learning how to cut hair very well, we should be able to spend 40 to 60 hours to learn how to be a good pro-lifer. So the objective of the pro-life program is to make you more effective and more efficient. We don't have any time to spend. We're outnumbered and we're outspent tremendously. So this will show you how to spend your money and your time much more effectively at the beginning. so you don't waste a lot of time and money. This is going in and out. So we begin with the first day. Usually when we have a 3-day training program, we start with the foundational issues. And we have 5 different segments that take up, or sessions that take up that day. An introduction to the program in detail. Why are you here and how is this going to help you? Essential terms to educate it properly. I'll be done in about 6 or 7 minutes. I always end on time. So he knows this. I try to be a good speaker and not give you any gas pains here. The second and third days of this training program are about the topics. Once you have a foundation, we talk about the actual life issues: abortion, advanced sciences like advanced reproductive technologies and transhumanism, atheism and communism, contraception, dissent in the church, which is very important because you're going to start seeing that in the future years, where a group organized to attack the 4 marks of the church: 1, holy, Catholic, and apostolic. And there's a short book of about 180 pages on this, a little thumb drive, which shows you how to defeat these groups, how to get rid of them. Eugenics, euthanasia, family under attack, and how to defend it, the gender agenda, homosexuality. The longest one, which I'll start tomorrow, is the population control agenda. What are their motivations? What are they thinking? And how do they operate around the world? Sex education, the wisdom of God's plan for our lives, and the conclusion, where do we go from here? Now, usually we have a 3-day training program. We cover the first or second parts of each session, and you can complete those by yourself. And then there's the third part, which is the self-study or organizational sessions. Once you have the foundation, and once you know about the topics, now comes the time to get organized. And that's what the 3rd day or the 4th day actually does. How to win abortion debates, how to organize and plan your pro-life group, and the 12 anti-life tactics, how they will try to attack you, and how they will try to establish their regime in the country. Things like acting like a victim, things like censorship or coercion. And we see a lot of coercion when the United Nations says, you've had a disaster in this country, we're not going to help you unless you get rid of, your strictures against abortion, unless you accept reproductive rights. In a place like Little Grenada down in the Caribbean, they said to the Prime Minister, we won't help you after that hurricane unless you ban prayer from the schools. This is the World Health Organization. The major themes in my conclusion here of the entire training program are the devil's general and focused attacks, the very, very, very important thing, because the devil will try to attack you once you become an effective pro-lifer. Some very saintly priests like Father John Hardin, S.J., Venerable, wrote about how to defend against the attacks of the devil. The 10 sources of influence in society. How is the society organized? Where is the culture of life and culture of death? And the 4 elements of the person: the physical, the mental, the emotional, and spiritual, which is the key to a happy marriage, as it describes on this little thumb drive. It's also the key to your good health, because if one part of you is suffering, physical, mental, emotional, spiritual, the other usually suffers as well. So we have to keep all 4 elements of ourselves as healthy as we possibly can. The 3 fundamental principles on which a training program is based. Many things could give you temporary joy and excitement, but there's only 2 things that can give you true happiness and contentment, and that's God and the family, faith and family. We must defend them at all possible costs, because if they win in Tanzania and you lose faith and family, you've got a bunch of glittery garbage in your hands, and that's all you've got. You will not be a happy nation. Look at Europe, and look at the United States. The second of the three is science always supports the teachings of the Catholic Church, particularly regarding sexual morality. And finally, a lot of people say it's hard to live as a Catholic, but it's not. When you can escape the devil's snares, it makes your life a lot easier. Remember what I said a few minutes ago about the young people trying to consider whether or not they're going to get sexually active. It's easier and healthier to live by the Catholic Church teachings than it is to live by any other way. And I once even knew back in Portland, Oregon, 2 atheist men who are better Catholics than most Catholics. The only difference between them and a really good pro-lifer is they didn't believe in God. They didn't believe in God, but they believed in the teachings of the Catholic Church. And eventually, they actually converted many of their friends. So that is the end of my presentation. I'm going to give the thumb drive here to Mr. Emil so he can distribute them, but I do want the bottle back. I do want the bottle back.
Okay. Can I say something real quick? And then Emil,
Sure.
you can always translate it.
Yes.
One thing that I would recommend to Mr. Emil, and he may already be thinking of this level, because for many, English is not your primary language, first language, that what we've done in other countries with the thumb drive and many of our education materials is a designated leader in a community. We did this in Rwanda, for example, that those who speak and understand English better, they would study, and then they would form a study group, and then they would help translate into their own native language what's on the thumb drive, in a sense, so they're learning, and then they're helping others to learn. So it's another way to strengthen one's knowledge with that. So I would say to Mr. Gill, that's what I would recommend, that maybe some of the English-speaking leaders, or those who are more comfortable in that language, could be the ones that you would trust, and then they then begin to start forming study groups, and then translate for their brothers and sisters in a language that they're familiar with, and begin to learn together. It's a way to learn together, too. You actually build a relationship with each other, and that's really important, too. You realize that you're learning together. So that would be my recommendation.
Thank you.
Thank you, Father. I just want to spend about 30 seconds. The English speakers will receive this little book, A Pro-Life Pastoral Handbook. It has the 40 most popular asked questions about the various life issues: abortion, birth control, homosexuality, matrimony, transgenderism, and so on. You can begin by learning these 40 questions, and this will be most of the questions that you will get from your friends, from your family, from fellow workers, churchgoers, and so on about the pro-life issues once they learn that you are a pro-lifer. So these are the 40 essential questions to know how to answer in this little book. It's also on the thumb drive.
Thank you, Brian, for your brief presentation on issues that you have mentioned. Now, for those who may not be able to use this handbook, it's in English. I have translated this into Swahili, so every participant who is not able to use this booklet can use it, which I will translate it into Swahili. So they will be available to each one of you. So this will be distributed to English-speaking countries where English is their predominant language. For Tanzanian people, you will get the Swahili translated version. I've done the translation. So just summary for my friends who may not have had the chance to understand Brian's talk in English. So this is a summary of what I heard from Brian. Dr. Brian ameanza maelezo yake au kuwasilisha mada yake kwa kueleza familia yake, na ni nzuri sana kama mfano kwamba yeye anatoka kwenye familia kubwa. Mke wake yeye mwenyewe hakuwa mtetezi uhai, alikuwa mpinga uhai, lakini alipomwoa mke wake ambaye alikuwa maskini, yeye alitoka kwenye familia bora, tajiri. Sasa baada ya kumwoa huyu mama, basi taratibu yeye pia akawa mwana mtetezi wa uhai, na hata katika uzao wao, watoto wao, yeye alitaka wazao watoto wawili. Mke wake alisema anataka atae wazao watoto wengi kidogo, 5 hivi. Sasa wakakubaliana, hatimaye wameishia kuwa na watoto 7, sio tena wawili, na wana nafasi nzuri, sio kwamba ni maskini, wana nafasi nzuri sana katika maisha yao. Ameongea pia kuhusu shirika hili la Nyumbani International, jinsi lilivyoanza, na amemtaja Padre Paul Max ambaye mimi nilimtaja katika mawasilisho yangu asubuhi leo, kwamba alikuwa ametembea nchi nyingi, nchi 91 duniani, akipanda mbegu za utetezi wa uhai. Na nilisema asubuhi kwamba hapa Tanzania alifika mwaka 1988 na alifikia kule seminari kuu ya Peramio, akona na Monsignori Kangalau. Amezungumzia kazi za HLI, kazi za shirika hili la Nyumbani International. Kwanza amesema limeenea katika nchi 101 duniani. Ni shirika pekee la utetezi wa uhai ambalo limeenea mahali pengi au katika nchi nyingi duniani. Kazi zake kubwa amesema ni kufundisha utetezi wa uhai, lakini pia linagawa vitendea kazi ambavyo vinatumika kwa kufundishia, kama vile ameonyesha kitabu hiki, ameonyesha hii sample drive kwa kuweka katika kompyuta. Pia kutambua wanapofundisha, pia tunawatambua watu ambao wanaweza kuwa viongozi, na mimi pia nimefanya hivyo katika nchi ambazo nimetembea katika Afrika na kuongea Kiingereza, na kumtambua mtu kwamba huyu anaweza kuwa viongozi. Na ndio maana mnamuona yuko hapa na Alois kutoka Rwanda, mnamuona Father Emmanuel Lungu kutoka Zambia na wengineo, na Father Opio pia, na kina Monica na huyo Reberieni nimemuona kutoka Burundi. Tunajaribu kutambua nani anaweza kuwa viongozi na kwanza kumlea kuwa kiongozi katika nchi zile. Pia kuanzisha huduma au mashirika katika nchi hizo. Nilifanya vile kwa Malawi, nilipokuta Father Mangani miaka ile ya mwanzoni, tukashauriana, basi akawa mkurugenzi yeye, na sasa na niko mkurugenzi mpaka leo. Ndio sasa mnamuona yuko hapa Bwana Peter Sambakusi na Bright Nikolulu ni wanamsaidia Father Mangani katika zile. Pia anasema shirika hilo lina malengo ya Kikatoliki, na popote tunapofundisha tunatumia mafundisho ya Kanisa Katoliki na kutoa majibu kulingana na mafundisho ya Kanisa Katoliki. Kwa hiyo usipate shida kujibu maswali ambayo unaulizwa, sababu kanisa limeshakuwa tayari. Na ametaja majina ambayo yanahamasisha utamaduni wa kifo hapa Tanzania. Ametaja machache, yako mengi katika kidudu wiki hapa, utasoma yako mengi sana. Halafu ameongea kuhusu thumb drive ambayo mtagawiwa baadaye. Ina nini ndani yake? Ni chanzo cha maarifa ya pro-life ambayo kama mtaka kusoma vizuri. Ina vitabu vingi na kubwa kutosha, na katika thumb drive amesema pia kwamba ameonyesha mle mikakati ya kudhibiti ukuaji wa idadi ya watu katika Afrika, na ametaja document hii inaitwa NSSM 200. Ni document ya siri ya Marekani ya mwaka 1974 ambayo imeeleza namna gani Marekani itapata mali asili au kutoka nchi maskini kwa ajili ya maendeleo ya Marekani. Amesema pia namna ya kujibu misukumo ya hoja potofu, kwa mfano za watu ushoga hao, utoaji mimba, elimu ya ngono, teknolojia saidizi ya kizazi. Wanaleta watu na hoja kwamba inakuwaje, basi sisi tuweze kujibu. Amesema pia kiasi cha fedha ambazo zimetumika hapa Afrika kusukuma ajenda ya utamaduni wa kifo. Amesema imetumika bilioni 6 za Marekani. Ni hela nyingi sana kusukuma mambo hayo. Amesema pia kingine ambacho unaweza kufurahia humu, sasa lazima ufahamu utamaduni wa watu, yaani ili ucheke kwa vichekesho ya Wamarekani au watu wa Uingereza, lazima ujue utamaduni wake. Amesema hapa kuna vichekesho 760 katika kuonyesha labda paka cheza nini jinsi ya kufundisha uhai, na pia drive inasaidia kuwa mtetezi wa uhai bora na mbalimbali ambazo unaziona katika ufundishaji. Kwa mfano siku ya pili au somo la kwanza, somo la pili, somo la tatu mpaka unapomaliza, na ukimaliza unakuwa tayari umeshatekeleza washiriki wa utetezi wa uhai katika mafundisho hayo. Kwa hiyo kwa kifupi nitaka nikushirikishe mambo ambayo Brian ameyaongea katika kuasisi mada yake. Nadhani inafahamika. Labda nitoe muda kidogo if there are any questions for his presentation. So I allow you to ask if Dr. Brian is ready to respond. Kama una swali au swali atajibu. Lakini pia Father Woke aliposimama amesema namna gani hii inatumika. Sio kila mmoja anaweza kuitumia. Inataka sana uelewa, inataka sana ujuzi wa kompyuta au laptop. Bila kujua kompyuta, bila kuwa mjuzi wa lugha ya Kiingereza, mada hizi zitakuwa ngumu. Na pia bila kuwa na uelewa kutosha kuhusu namna kutumia inakuwa ngumu. Tunafanyaje? Tunakuwa na kikundi kidogo, amependekeza hivyo, tuwe na kikundi kidogo ambao watu wanaweza kuelewa, tukae nao kwa siku kadhaa, tuwafundishe, wazamisho vizuri. Baada ya hapo hao ndio wanakwenda kufundisha wengine huko waliko. Ndio namna ya kwenda. Ametoa mfano wa Rwanda, tulifanya pia Rwanda, Alos alifanya pia Rwanda kule. Tulikuwa na session moja pale mjini Kigali mwaka jana. Baada ya pale yeye akaenda akaitisha watu ambao anaona wanaweza kumsaidia. Baada ya kufundisha wale wanaweza kumsaidia, sasa ameanza program sehemu mbalimbali na anafanya sana kwa namna hiyo. Kwa hiyo tunafanya vile, na sisi pia tumekuwa tukifanya vile katika miaka mingi hii ya utume wetu. Kwa hiyo ndio namna kutumia. Kwa hiyo sio kila mmoja atapata, kwa sababu sio wote tuna kompyuta, lakini sio wote tuna uwezo wa kuelewa haya ambayo yameandikwa. Sasa mengine ni purely ya kichungaji, na wachungaji, mapadre, kisoma kitabu hiki mnapata nafasi kabisa ya kuwasaidia wanaparokia wenu na ya kujibu hoja hizo za watetezi wa kifo. So welcome for we have any question to ask Dr. Brian, or maybe this question in Kiswahili, I'll translate it into English. Okay, so welcome. Looks like there's no question.
Perfect.
The topic was well understood. All right. Thank you. There's no question. Thank you.
It was a perfect talk.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
Perfect. Okay, now, Father, want to add something? No?
My Cobra story.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah, please.
That's a good one.
Now, please, in the program, we say we will have evening prayers this time. Unfortunately, the chapel or the shrine is now being used for mass, for the evening mass for the people who live here. So we'll not have the prayers. Instead, Father will come to produce a short story about the cobra. After that, we shall disperse for personal management. Father, welcome.
Thank you.
Okay, so we're going to do one final story for the evening. Bishop, can I borrow you for a little while? Would you be able to come up and stand with me? We use this same story. Let me not block off the camera. Bishop, can you come stand up here? Please, yeah, please. So, what we have been talking about is how to be not only active in the pro-life and family movement, but also how to be proactive. So let me use, by using the bishop, and I'm going to try to tell a story and to help apply it, okay? So we're going to pretend that the bishop is the Bishop of Dar es Salaam, okay? So that's what we're going to pretend tonight, all right? So he's the Archbishop of Dar es Salaam. So one day, now I want you to pretend with me that the entire city of Dar es Salaam is surrounded by a very tall, impenetrable wall. The entire city surrounded by a wall, and there's only one way in and one way out. And the bishop, the archbishop in this case, is the one who is the governor of the door. He has the key, the only one that can open and close the door. Okay? You're right with that? So he is the keeper of the door. So one day, a king cobra comes to the door and uses his tail to knock on the door. And so the archbishop goes down, he opens up a little door, and he's trying to figure out, well, I don't see anyone, I wonder who's knocking. And then he looks down, and there's the king cobra, all dressed in a nice suit, a tie. His bangs are all clean and sharp. He's got cologne on. He looks fit to kill. There's beautiful snake. And the king cobra says to the bishop, "Bishop, let me into your city. I want to come in." And the bishop says, "Oh, no. You cannot come into my city. You are a king cobra. You're deadly, poisonous. No, you're not coming into my city." But the cobra pleads with the bishop. "Oh, you're all wrong, Your Excellency. That's not what I do. I might be a snake, a king cobra. I might be poisonous, but I won't do any harm to you or your city. I'm a great singer. I'm a great cook. I can dance. I can tell jokes. I'm great in medicine and pharmacy. I can be a great help to Your Excellency if you just let me in." But the bishop again stands his ground. No. You are still a king cobra. No, you still can't come in. But the cobra, with his very forked tongue, convinces the bishop that he will do no harm. And against the right judgment, his very forked tongue convinces the bishop that he will do no harm. And against the right judgment, the bishop lets the cobra in. So in comes the cobra. And we will say that for many months, the cobra was a best friend to the bishop. He was kind, generous. He did all the things that he said he would do. He was a great singer. He sang in the school choir, for Holy Mass, He was a great cook. He was just clever in telling jokes. He was just a great asset to the city. Until one night, when everybody was asleep, including the bishop, the king cobra slithered around throughout the city, and he bit every person, killing all the citizens of the city, and saved the bishop for last. Now I have a question. Whose fault is it that all the people of Dar es Salaam are dead? Is it the snake's fault, or is it the bishop's fault? Whose fault is it? It's the bishop's fault. The cobra was doing what its nature is. The one who should never have let the cobra in was the keeper of the door. My point is simple, that we have a great truth about life and about the beauty of life, the beauty of marriage, the beauty of sexual love between husband and wife. We have a great teaching, and we need to be careful as the ones who hold the keys to the door that we don't let the enemy in. And that's important for us. As a bishop who has great responsibility for the local church, he has a very difficult task to try to protect the people from false teaching, false doctrine. As priests and religious, we have a similar responsibility. But all of us here have a duty, all of us, to protect others from harm and to teach what is good and true. So, in this case, using a king cobra, we should never let that enemy in. Dr. Brian gave a few examples of poisonous roots like Population Services International, PSI, Marie Stokes. We can talk about UKAID. We can speak about USAID. We can speak about many different groups like Planned Parenthood, or you talk about the Melinda and Bill Gates, now the Gates Foundation, or the George Soros Foundation. They all come in with that clean suit, nice and pretty. And they don't tell you everything they do. They tell you what they want you to hear, just like the Cobra did, trying to tell you what you want to hear. It is our duty to be diligent and to do our homework. What does this group actually do? Some do very, very good work. Some do a little good work and some very bad things. That is where we as leaders need to make sure before we open a door to someone that we're certain to the best of our do no harm to our people. And if they do, we need to put them out. Okay? So, thank you, Bishop, very much. Don't open to the cobra. Don't let the cobra in. And so, one last thing. I'll still myself. Do we have a couple of minutes?
I want to invite Father Kapinga to come to this example.
Okay, because I was going to mention Malawi. Because an example, and I was going to say, and you can always talk to our delegation from Malawi, and that is, he can tell you the story of what happened recently because of educating young people. Well, Zinwantani and the great team there, that because of their great teaching, the students, when they encountered Planned Parenthood and other groups coming in to try to teach the students about being sexually active, experimentation, use of condoms, the students chased out of the school. The students. So when we teach truth, right, we empower people to make right decisions. That's how you keep the cobra out. All right? So thank you very much. Great job.
Thank you. Okay, nilidhani mfano huo usipite bila. Kwa hiyo Father Kapinga ndio hapo. Ueleze mfano wa cobra. Mchukue mmoja hapa, atakuwa cobra na wewe utakuwa ndio utakuwa na niajo. Father Kapinga ataeleza kwa Kiswahili huo mfano ambao Father ameutoa hapo. Karibu. Hujapata vizuri. Yeah.
Speaking Swahili.
Yes, yes.
Kikristu. Mfano ni mara kwanza nausikia, lakini basi kadri nilivyoelewa kwamba mfano huu ulichukuliwa kwa askofu kama ni mtunza funguo.
Cobra.
Na
yeah.
Cobra akiwa amevaa mavazi nadhifu, alifika katika nyumba ya baba askofu. Kwa kuwa baba askofu alishika funguo, alikuta mlango umefungwa, na hivi Cobra akashindwa kuingia ndani moja kwa moja. Na hivi katika hali ya nadhifu ule akagonga mlango ili baba askofu aweze kumfungulia, lakini alipojaribu kufungua kwa kuwa Cobra umbile lake ni dogo, hakuweza kuona kwa haraka. Kwa hiyo kufungua mlango akaangaza huku akuona, lakini alipokwenda chini akamwona Cobra katika mavazi nadhifu. Cobra alichomwona baba askofu ni kwamba naomba niingie ndani, lakini baba askofu kwa sababu anajua asili ya Cobra ni nyoka ambaye ana sumu kali, na hivi akamkatalia kuingia ndani, kwa sababu kuna moja, akiingia ndani anaweza kumzuru yeye au akafanya lolote ambalo linaleta madhara. Na hiyo baba askofu akawa mgumu kuruhusu Cobra kuingia ndani. Na hivi katika mzozo huo mwisho wa siku katika giza nene ikatokea watu wamelala. Na hivi yule Cobra kwa kuwa kuruhusiwa kuingia ndani, basi yeye akatumia mbinu nyingine, na hivi akaenda katika mji Dar es Salaam, akaanza kuwadhuru watu. Na hiyo kwa kule watu kwa ile sumu kali ikatokea, basi wale watu waliodhuriwa na Cobra wakawa wamekufa. Sasa swali likaja, je, ni tatizo la nani? Je, huyu Cobra aliyewadhuru watu hatimaye amekufa na askofu peke yake? Sasa hii ni tatizo la nani? Na huyu Cobra mwenyewe au baba askofu? Kwa hiyo swali kaja kwetu sisi. Na sisi tukasema ni nani? Tukasema ni baba askofu. Kwa sababu gani? Kwa sababu baba askofu hakuruhusu Cobra kuingia ndani. Sasa kwa kuwa mambo yamefungwa, yeye akaamua Cobra kwenda katika miji sasa kuwadhuru watu. Hatimaye matokeo ya vifo vikawa vingi zaidi. Nafikiri mnaona mafundisho kwa sana kwetu.
Asante sana Father. Ni kwa sababu nisikia mfano mara ya kwanza, mimi nimesikia mara nyingi akifundisha, amefanya vizuri mali pamoja kwa dogo, nadhani kama sawa. Huyu nyoka alipofika kwenye mkoa wa Dar es Salaam, kwa Dar es Salaam umezungushwa ukuta mzito mrefu, hawezi kuingia mtu mwingine katika mji, lakini kuna mlango mmoja tu ambao funguo zake anazo mwenyewe mkuu wa mjule apate baba ajeni mwenye funguo, hawezi kuingia mtu yote mwingine mle ndani ya mjule mpaka hapo baba funguo. Sasa nyoka alikuwa anagonga mara nyingi, na kwa nini katika Biblia mwanamke ambaye anapiga wote jamani nipe kwa baadaye mfano wa Mose amegonga baadaye baba sobe yule huruma nani anagonga muda mrefu, huyu atafungua mlango mdogo kuangalia kumbe ni mwewe ni nyoka. Lakini yule nyoka anasema alikuwa afya ya mama na mtoto. Watu mnatupazika, hamjui ndani yake ana hila yake, ndani yake ana gani. Ina kumruhusu kama journalist kama wanashiriki za hapa nchini wakisema tunapokuwa mama na mtoto, barabara kwa mfano na mambo ya afya haya. Mnaweza kwamba ana mwema huyu kwa kweli, kumbe hamjui ila anayoibeba. Kwa mwisho wake anawaumiza, ndio kwa ambao ametoa. So now we come to the end, and we have about 7 minutes for rest. We go to rest, professional management, and 7 we come back for, we come down here for our supper. Now there, you may delay. Those will be punctual, we finish. When you come, it's not. So thank you so much. Maybe we need prayer for Thanksgiving prayer, for the session prayer, for that, please. Amen. Amen.
The Lord be with you.
And with your spirit.
May Almighty God bless you, the Father, the Son, the Holy Spirit.
Amen.
God in peace of Christ.
Thank you.
You want to bless the meal?
Yeah. Is it too early? It may be too early.
You got 5 minutes.
Yeah, but we'll bless it down there. Kwa IQ mzuri. Namna mrani alivyo mkundu.
Bwana. Umri ni kama, yani umri unakuwa na ubunifu. Baadaye tunakuja na huko. Kwa hiyo kuchomolea hapo.
Nenda na chumba. Kwa kwanza daima ni ngumu. Kitu kwanza daima ni ngumu. Hasa wenzangu wa mimi hawa ambao tunyuze mikaa pembeni kwa shida.